In this video I will comment the first chapter of this book, Schriften zur Metaphysik und Logik, and I have the French version. I will talk about the chapter 1 on concepts. It's a series of lectures that Kant gave to his students about classical logic, and classical logic must be differentiated from Hegel's logic, which is speculative logic. But the first classical logic is a step which enable one to understand speculative logic. So I will comment in a chronological, orderly way. And the concept in logic is separated into universal, particular, and singular. And what is universal is that which is true for all. The particular is a negation, a determination, a limitation of the universal. And for instance, as a universal being, as a thinking being, I can express universal truths. If I say 2 + 2 = 4, this truth is universal. It is true for every thinking human, and if there are extraterrestrial beings in another planet or galaxy or wherever, this truth is true for them also. As an individual, I am particular in the sense that I am a man, and the particular are opposed between one another in the sense that if I am a man, I am not a woman. And another particularity of mine is that I am a European. And if I am a European, I cannot be an Asian or an African or an Australian or whatever. But I can be a European man, and there can be Asian women. So there are different kinds of particulars. Some are opposed to one another and they mutually exclude one another, and some are coordinated in the sense that I am not only a European and a man, I am also a mammal. I am in my 30s. I cannot be in my 20s and in my 30s at the same time, but I can be a European in my 20s. I'm not in my 30s. I am 29, but I am in my late 20s. But I cannot be in my late 20s and in my early 30s at the same time. That's logically contradictory. But I can be a European in my late 20s, or there can be Australian Aboriginal women in their early 40s. These are coordinated particularities. And then there's the singularity. And as a singular individual, I am just me, this empirical person that you see with my body, my own psychology, my own history, my own desires, tendencies, etc., etc. And in this singular existence of mine, I am opposed to all other singulars. And the universal is the realm of unity, and the particular and the singular are the realm of negation and opposition. And human beings are in a conflict with one another because their singularities and their particularities are opposed to one another. And they can only unite themselves and agree with one another and reconcile themselves through the mediation of universality. And what is universal only exists for the thought. And this is the tragic aspect of human existence, namely the fact that we are intellectually one, because the truth is the same for every thinking mind, but we are particularly and singularly opposed. So, yeah. I will comment systematically the chapter by Kant. He says that knowledge comes to us in two modes, two ways of knowing. There is intuition and concepts. And intuition for Kant is Anschauung. It's a spatially and temporally determined perception. When we say intuition, we have the idea of a cognitive act. I have the intuition, this. But in the language of Kant, an intuition is a perception which is determined in time and space. And an intuition is always singular. I can have the intuition of a window, of a bookshelf, of a tree, of a computer screen, it's always singular. Whereas the concept is always general. It is always a reflection. It always goes beyond the particular. The concept as Kant understands it. And the concept for Hegel and the concept for Kant are different. These are the same words, but with a very different meaning. But here I'm talking about the concept for Kant. When I think about a tree, the concept of a tree, the concept of a book, the concept of a computer, I go beyond the particularity and the singularity, and if I think correctly about what a computer is, I can know what all computers throughout the world are. They are different in computing power, in the price, the size, the level of technology, the way they were produced, the components which are composing the computer. So they vary and they differ in an infinite number of ways, but the concept of a computer is identical in each singular embodiment of the computer. And each computer is a singular computer, but it is also a particular computer in the sense that it is a particular brand of computer, a particular type or model, etc., etc. So every object and every subject, every object contains within itself the moment of the singular, the particular, and the universal. That's very important. Yeah. So Kant says that thinking or thought is the process or the act of acquiring knowledge through concept. By perception and sensation, we acquire knowledge through the senses. We are constantly informed of our sensuous presence in the world by the external phenomena, but through the thinking activity, we can know conceptually what things are. So yeah, we can reflect upon our immediate presence in the world. By being immediately present in the world, we are informed by our inside and the outside world. And when we think, we mediate, we reflect, we divide, we separate what is immediately given and we transform it into a thought. If I want to know what I have right before my eyes, namely a computer screen, if I think about it, I know vaguely that it is composed of chemical elements and that there is light reflecting on the screen and penetrating into my eyes and making chemical connections within my brain which make me see colors and shapes and etc., etc. So, or if I hit the table on which it is standing, it is an immediate knowledge, but if I think about it, I know that my fist is not touching the table because there is electromagnetic repulsion between the electrons of my hand and the electrons of the table, and that they do not touch one another. I have the feeling that they touch, but actually if I think about it from a physical standpoint, I know that I do not touch the table. There's an electromagnetic repulsion. So this is the way of reflecting, thinking about the world. But when we do, and that's what scientists do, they transform the immediate presence of the world into a thinking, into a reflected world. We have now two worlds, the world of thought and the world of immediate perception. And it's not satisfactory because there is division and we feel divided and separated. So, yeah. Kant says that for every concept there is a distinction between the form of the concept and the content or the matter. The form is always universality. The content can be drawn out of the empirical world. For instance, the concept of a tree or the concept of a woman. The form is universal in the sense that the concept of a tree contains within itself all the trees, and the concept of a woman explains what all women are, but the content is different. And Kant draws attention to the fact that there are empirical concepts and pure concepts. Empirical concepts are drawn out of ordinary experience, for instance, a tree or a woman, but pure concepts, they are derived from metaphysics, and examples of such concepts are the logical categories: quality, quantity, substance, cause, possibility. And the question whether these pure concepts are derived from the experience by a process of unconscious abstraction, or whether they are present within the mind, whether they are innate ideas that they constitute the very structure of our mind, or do we unconsciously derive them from experience by a process of habit, of usually abstracting. That's a very fundamental question which was debated in the 17th century in the famous debate between Locke, John Locke, the British empiricist, and Leibniz, the German rationalist. And Locke believed that we extracted these concepts out of a habit of experience, and Leibniz believed that these were innate ideas given to our mind by God, basically. And Kant tried to reconcile both, and he said that these concepts like quality, quantity, substance were structures, a priori structures of our transcendental ego. They were the way in which we mediated our experience of the world. I simplify. And this idea, then there's the debate between Hume. Hume believed that causality could not be proven to be in the world, that when we say that the sun will rise tomorrow, we predicate this because we have the habit of seeing the sun rise every morning, but it's possible that the sun will not rise. Or if I say that all swans are white, I extrapolate, it's an induction, but what if one day there was a black swan, then my idea of the swan would have to be reconsidered. So these are the kind of debates which we found in the 18th century. So there's the process of the debate between Leibniz and Locke in the 17th century. Then there's Hume, who criticized the category of causality, and it forces Kant to reconsider the origin of our ideas and the structure of our mind, and so on and so forth. This is very interesting for those who want to study philosophy, but I will try to make things to go to the point. Kant talks about rational concepts, that which he calls ideas. An idea is not a mental representation for Kant. It's a higher concept. It's a totality, a conceptual totality, a whole, which cannot be given in the experience. And the idea for Kant is some sort of a whole which determines its own parts. It's a guide or a regulating principle of thinking. And for Kant, the whole of the idea is the principle which shapes and structures all the parts which are contained within the idea. And an illustration of what an idea might be is life. An organism is a totality in which the principle of the whole, namely the organic principle, shapes every part, and every organ of the organism is what it is through its determination and its relationship with all other parts, and with the idea, which is not present while at the same time being manifest throughout the organism, which is in relation to all other parts and to the idea of the whole itself. So life is an illustration in the realm of nature of what an idea is. Yeah. Kant talks about the idea of freedom, that we should behave and act as if there was a God. Whether there is a God or not, says Kant, we should act as if there was a God. Truth is, there is a God, but yeah. So the idea of a science for Kant is the plan, the general map, the structure. The idea of the science of physics would be the conceptual organization and structuring of all the branches of physics, for instance. Then he distinguishes a priori concepts and a posteriori concepts. And a priori concepts, they are the categories that I mentioned: causality, substance, quality, quantity, possibility, etc., etc. A posteriori concepts are abstractions drawn out of our experience, like the concept of a tree, a window, a computer, a woman, a glass of water, a chair, whatever. Then Kant asks himself, how do we form concept? How do we create, I might say, but that's not the proper word. How do we, where do concepts come from? He says that logic is subjective, formal thought. And in this sense, he's the antithesis of Hegel. For Hegel, the idea that logic is just in our mind, that it's just a subjective thought, is false. For Hegel, thought is subjective and objective. So Kant is opposed to Hegel. So yeah, and whatever is opposed to Hegel is a moment of the process of development of Hegel's philosophy, but that's another story. And he wonders, how do representation, the sensuous impressions, the intuitions, the perceptions, how do they become concept? And he says that through an act of the mind which compares, there's an act of comparison, reflection, and abstraction. We confront the various representations, and this is the unity of our consciousness, the unity of our mind, which compares the various representation that we have. For instance, now I see many books, I see the diversity and the multiplicity, but my consciousness can unite this multiplicity into the comparison of the various books and think about the unity of books, of a book. Then by reflecting, we see, that's an improper way, we conceptually understand the unity in diversity and the diversity in unity. And by abstracting, which is the third step, we leave aside what distinguishes the objects, what separates the objects, and we keep only the unity. If I look at my books, I see different titles, different authors, different shapes, different sizes, different colors. And if I want to understand what the concept of a book is, I must abstract, reflect, and compare. But I cannot only do that by seeing or touching the book. I have to think, because I have to understand the purpose of a book. And the purpose, the reason why there are books, it's not sensuously perceptible. I have to know that human beings share ideas through the medium of writings, and I have to, the idea of a purpose or the cause, why are there books, what is the purpose? So these ideas are logical structures of the mind, and they can only be grasped through thought. A primitive person who had never seen any book in his life, confronted by a book, he would not know what it is. He would see the color, the shape, the size, the weight, the pages, but he would not know what a concept of a book is, because he would not understand writing and etc. etc. The example that I can take, if we have strawberries, blueberries, pineapples, bananas, mangoes, peaches, we see different shapes, different colors, different sizes, different tastes, different smells. And then if we want to know what the concept of a fruit is, we have to compare, to reflect, and to abstract. And only a botanist, a specialist in botanics, really knows what a fruit is, the biological, organic, botanical definition of a fruit. And in the realm of formal logic, we are confronted by a duality, because I guess that many people would not find it satisfactory to know what the concept of a fruit is in the realm of botanics without being able to eat a fruit. So there are two kinds of people. Actually, no, because people who study botanics probably have eaten fruit in their life. But one imagine that eating fruits without knowing what it is not satisfactory for the scientist, and knowing what the concept is of a fruit without tasting the taste of a fruit is not satisfactory either. So how should we reunite both? That's the whole question of Hegel's philosophy. How to reconcile the immediate presence and the mediation of thought and reflection. How to make ideas manifest. That's the whole question of Hegel's philosophy. Kant says that there's a difference between abstracting something and abstracting from something. And when we form concepts, when we make concepts, we abstract from the empirical objects. we leave aside determinations. Determinations are not really qualities, but a quality is a determination, but a determination is not necessarily a quality. These are everyone understands the word determination. It is the limit, the characteristic, the property, whatever. When we abstract an object to grasp the concept of a fruit, I have to leave aside the determination of the particular size, color, shape, and species of the fruit. I have to leave aside determinations, and this is what we call abstraction, and to abstract. The more we leave aside determinations, the more the concept is abstract. If I want to grasp the concept of a body, that is drawn from Kant's example, I have to leave aside the shape of the body, the size of the body, the color of the body, the toughness of the body, etc., etc. And Kant says that the most abstract concept that we can form are the concept of something and nothing. And Hegel says something is already too concrete. We must go further into abstraction, which is being, pure being. This is the most abstract concept one can think of, but pure being is so abstract that there is nothing in it. That's why pure being is nothing. That's the beginning of Hegel's logic. So the process of abstraction is a negative process. And Kant says that the process of comparison and reflection is positive. So thinking is a negative act because we separate, we distinguish, we transform, we reflect, we negate. That's why, strictly speaking, for someone who doesn't think, there is no negativity in the world. That's why some Eastern wisdom say you should not think. Stop thinking. Thinking is the cause of all suffering, which is true. But it's also the source of all knowledge, and all thinking can produce satisfaction, so it's ambiguous. Yeah. And then he says that there's a difference between the Inhalt, in German, the comprehension, so to speak, and the Umfang, which is the extension. And Inhalt can be translated as content, but more accurately as comprehension or inclusion, and Umfang is the extension. And Kant says, which is a logical truth, that they are inversely proportional. The more something includes determinations within itself, the less extension it has. A fully determined object is just what it is. But a concept which has a very broad extension, which applies to many things, has less determination. If I talk about the concept of a thing, what is a thing? Hegel explains what a thing is in his logic. It is a very poor, very abstract concept. But because it is so poor, because it has such a small comprehension, a small content, it can be applied to a broad range of things. A book is a thing, a computer is a thing, this piece of paper is a thing. So those who talk about things, they can be applied to anything. That's a good joke. A thing can be applied to anything. Logic can be quite comical sometimes. But it is so poor that we are not satisfied. Do you want to do something tonight? No, I don't want to do something. I would rather do something else. This kind of conversation would be kind of silly. We need to determine, to create more determinations to mean what we mean. Do you want to go to the cinema tonight? No, I would rather go to a pub. That's more determinate. That's more concrete. That's more meaningful. Yeah. Yeah. He says that the relationship between the ground, Grund in German, and the consequences, the fundamental ground and the consequences which are derived from the ground, they are like the axioms or the definitions in mathematics, and the consequences which are derived from the mathematics, and the properties of the triangle are derived and contained in the definition of the triangle. And when we explain what the properties of a triangle are, we are simply clarifying, explaining what is already contained in the definition. And a great mathematician only needs the definition and the axioms and the postulates. He doesn't need the full development. It is only the development and the proof is a way of making things intelligible, but they are already contained in the first definitions and the axioms. So yeah. Kant says that the concept as a principle of knowledge contains that from which it has been abstracted. And the example that he gives is that metal, the concept of a metal, it contains within its concept gold, silver, lead, bronze, copper, iron, because all these particular metals are particularization of the concept of metal, which is universal. And every quantity of gold or silver or bronze contains within itself the determinations of the concept of the metal. But the opposite is not true. Metal is not necessarily gold, but gold is necessarily metal. Yeah. What I'm saying is very stupid, but that's basic logic. But sometimes it's good to go back to the basics. The greater the number of things which can be thought or represented by a concept, the greater is the sphere of the concept or the extension. The concept of a thing is very vast. Being, the concept of being, is even vaster, because everything is, including nothing, because nothing is nothing. So nothing is identical to itself. That's why nothing is, and yeah. Then he talks about superior and inferior concepts, and they are in a relationship of relativity, in the sense that a superior concept is only superior in relation to the concept which is inferior to the concept. A white man is a man is an animal is an organism is a physical body. So a white man is a physical body because he is made of atoms. But not all physical bodies are white men, because there would be problems otherwise, I guess. Thank God, some people might say. Sorry, sometimes I laugh at my own stupid jokes. Then he distinguishes the genus and the species, which is the genera. Genus, I prefer the Latin word. Genus and species, which have given the words general and special. And general is another word for universal, and special is another word for particular. And I wrote a reflection about women. Every woman, so the concept of a woman, the universal woman, and every woman contains within herself the concept of the universal woman. Every woman wants to hear that she's special. Every woman wants to hear you're special. So that's contradictory, because not every woman can be special, because the speciality, the particularity of the word special, which is a logical determination, is to exclude other particulars. So if this woman is special, it means that this other woman is not special. So women are never satisfied. I'm sorry. The supreme genus, the supreme genera, according to Kant, according to Hegel, is being or nothing. Nothing is greater than nothing. Or nothing is greater than being in terms of extension and vastness. Being is very vast. Yeah. He takes an example: iron, metal, body, substance, thing. And Hegel would say being, because a thing is, so we add being. So this progression from the more concrete to the more abstract is a logical elevation. Iron, an iron quantity, an iron mass is a metal is a body is a substance is a thing, and a thing is. So yeah. Each species, each particular in logic is the genera, the genus of an inferior concept, which means that European is a species of mankind, but European is the genera, so mankind is the genus, European is the species, but European is the genus of the particular types of Europeans, which are the species. So in terms of anthropological race, Mediterranean, Alpine, Nordic, Dinaric, Slavic, Celtic, etc., etc. These are species of Europeans, not in a biological sense, in the logical sense, but the two must coincide eventually. And yeah, the conceptum summum is the supreme concept. It is a genus, a genera, which cannot be a species. So it's the ultimate genus, that which includes within itself all other species. And this is the concept of the supreme being. The superior concept is larger or wider, and the inferior concept is narrower. By an inferior concept, we think less objects, but in a more determinate fashion. There is more determinations in an inferior concept, but its extension is narrower. He said that the inferior is not in the superior, but under the superior, because gold is inferior to metal, but gold is not in metal, because in metal there is bronze and silver and iron, but it is under the concept of metal, because it has more determinations. So the inferior is under the superior. And the superior is wider because it contains a concept, one concept and more. The concept of metal contains gold and more, silver, bronze, iron, platinum, etc., etc. Then a logical truth in classical logic is that the principle of subordination, what is true or false of all of the superior concept, is necessarily true or false of all the inferior concepts. What is true of the concept of a fruit is true of strawberries, bananas, oranges, peaches, and so on and so forth. And the reverse is true. If determinations are true for all the inferior concepts of a logical class, it means that the superior concept contains this truth or falsehood in itself. If all fruits have colors, including white fruits, it means that the concept of a fruit is a colored object, for instance. Yeah. And Kant says that things are in agreement, in accordance with one another through their universal properties, and they differ through their particular properties. And this is the tragedy of existence that I talked about at the beginning of the video, in the sense that humans are all equal in their mind, but they differ in their body. And through reason, all humans can be equalized, and through passion, they are divided. Yeah. By elevating ourselves through a thinking activity, we elevate ourselves in the realm of abstraction, and by going down, we determine ourselves. So, yeah. He says that intuitive knowledge is immediate, and here we meet the concept of an intellectual intuition, namely an immediate grasping through a cognitive process of what is fully determined. And this is what we find in Spinoza, what he calls the third kind of knowledge, the intellectual intuition in Schelling, and what Hegel calls speculative thinking. And there are three moments of knowledge. There is the sensuous intuition, the perception of a determined object immediately. There's the divide, the separation, the grasping of the object through a cognitive act of der Verstand, which is the faculty of abstracting, what Kant calls a concept, which is not the same meaning as the concept in Hegel, a mental representation. And the third movement, which is the movement of Hegel's philosophy, is to reunite what has been separated by a process of speculative thinking and to speculatively grasp, which means to grasp the individual singular object in its cognitive immediacy, so to speak. This is mystical thinking, speculative thinking. And Kant says that very abstract concepts give us little knowledge about many things. The concept of a thing, if I say that this object is a thing, I do not know very much about the object. But I know that many things are things. So by knowing what a thing is, I know a lot of things, so to speak. And concrete concepts in the vocabulary and terminology of Kant means that we know many determinations, but about very few things. If I know what a book is, a book has a lot of determinations, but a book is not a table. It's not a plant. It's not a chair. So we are constantly switching between abstraction and concrete, between determinations and lack of determinations, and we are constantly being moved in this reciprocal process of going up and down. And Kant says that the art of popularity, which is true for every teacher, is the ability to find the proper relationship, the just relationship, the adequate relationship between what is abstract and what is concrete, to make abstract ideas sensuous for the masses and to make sensation conceptually understandable. And the reason why Jesus was so popular is because he was very good at explaining deep truth by using parables. I don't know how you say it in English, but by using representation and images to express very deep truth. And that's why he had so much influence upon the lives of so many in his time, because he was a popular thinker in a sense of Kant, namely that he had the talent to unite abstraction and concrete realities. And Kant lacked this talent. But Kant is like the Jesus of philosophy, so to speak. But he didn't have the talent of Jesus to express his idea in a popular form. So yeah. And I will end the video by putting a link to a song which I had in mind when I prepared this video, Tainted Love by Marilyn Manson. Because love is tainted, but it's love nonetheless. And